You are not falling behind. You are getting closer to the truth, and that is why it hurts. If that sentence hit a nerve, quick thing. We are building toward our first 1,000 subscribers, and your subscription genuinely helps us reach more people with this kind of psychology. And if this is already describing your life a little too accurately, hit the like button too. It tells the algorithm this is worth showing to someone who needs it. Now let us name the experience precisely. You make progress, you are more disciplined than you used to be, you are learning, you are fixing things, and somehow the emotional signal inside you is not relief. It is pressure. It is this quiet, almost embarrassing thought, I am still behind. Most people think that feeling means one of two things. Either you are lazy or you are comparing yourself too much. That is the surface explanation. The deeper explanation is more unsettling and, honestly, more useful. Here is what is actually happening. Improvement changes your measurement system faster than it changes your life. So you can be objectively improving and subjectively losing. Think about that for a second. If your internal ruler changes length while you are building the house, you will feel like the walls are shrinking even as you add bricks. The first mechanism is what I call moving goalpost perception, but not in the cliché way. It is not just that you raise your standards, it is that your brain recalibrates what counts as normal at a speed that outpaces your ability to emotionally register gains. Neuroscientists call part of this hedonic adaptation. You get used to improvements. But the more interesting part is the predictive brain model. Your nervous system is not designed to reward truth, it is designed to reduce prediction error. When you improve, you create a new baseline prediction for yourself. Yesterday's wins stop being surprising, and if something is not surprising, your brain does not pay it with dopamine. So the emotional system that you think should celebrate progress goes quiet. It is not punishing you, it is conserving attention. Your brain says, good, that problem is handled, do not waste fuel celebrating it. Now find the next threat. And that leads to the twist. If you are improving, you become more sensitive to what is still wrong. Not because you are ungrateful, but because your perceptual resolution increases. Let me show you what I mean. When you first start lifting weights, you notice obvious changes. You feel stronger, you look a little different, your habits shift. Later, when you are actually advanced, you notice tiny asymmetries, weak links, micro-plateaus. The beginner feels like a hero. The intermediate feels behind. The advanced person feels like they are always chasing. That is not a mindset issue. That is literally higher resolution feedback. And here is the part most people never connect. Feeling behind can be a symptom of competence. When your brain learns a domain, it also learns the shape of the domain. It learns what good really looks like. That knowledge expands faster than your skill can catch up. Psychologists talk about this in the context of the Dunning-Kruger effect, but the more important point is what happens after that initial overconfidence phase. Once you see the mountain, you realize you are on the first ridge. So improvement does not just move you forward, it moves the horizon farther away. Now, if that was the whole story, you would just say, okay, I will accept it. But you do not accept it because the feeling is not neutral. It feels like falling, like you are being left behind by time itself. That is mechanism number 2, social time distortion. Your brain does not track progress in absolute units. It tracks progress relative to other minds. Humans evolved in small groups where relative position mattered for survival and mating and access to resources. That means your nervous system treats status like oxygen, not morally, mechanically. It is not asking, am I better than last year? It is asking, am I safe in the hierarchy right now? So when you improve, you do something dangerous. You start paying attention to the game you are actually playing, and that game is not your private self-improvement story. It is a competitive environment where the reference group keeps changing. Notice the pattern here. When you were struggling, your comparison group was your past self and maybe your immediate circle. When you start doing better, you unconsciously graduate to a different league. You begin comparing yourself to people you never used to consider relevant. People with better routines, more money, more output, more social leverage, more polished lives. Sometimes not even real people, but algorithmically selected highlights. So your progress upgrades your comparison set. That makes your relative position feel worse even as your absolute position improves. And because of how attention works, you do not compare in a fair way. You compare your behind the scenes with their curated signal. You compare your internal chaos with their external structure. That is not just social media is fake. It is a cognitive asymmetry. You have privileged access to your own uncertainty and only surface access to other people's certainty. So you will always feel more behind than you objectively are. Now here is where it gets interesting. Even if you delete every app and live in a cabin, you still carry the same mechanism because the comparison target can become an imagined audience, a future employer, a future partner, a version of you at 35. That is why people can feel behind in complete privacy. Which brings us to mechanism number 3, and this one is the real trap. Progress increases your identity debt. Identity debt is the gap between who you are becoming and the life structures that still reflect who you used to be. You improve internally first, you learn, you mature, you stop tolerating certain things, you gain clarity, but your environment does not update at the same rate. Your friends still treat you like the old you. Your family still expects the old role. Your job still rewards the old behaviors. Your calendar is still built for the person who procrastinated or people-pleased. So you have this weird split. Your internal system is upgraded, but your external system is legacy software. That mismatch creates a constant background signal of delay, like you are living one version behind. And that feeling is not imaginary. It is a real cognitive load. You are running two identities at once, the emerging self and the socially cached self. This is why some people feel worse right after they start improving. They start seeing clearly what they have been tolerating. Not only habits, but relationships, dynamics, and environments. The cost of staying becomes visible. And visibility feels like urgency. You interpret that urgency as, I am behind. But it is actually, I cannot unsee this anymore. Let me make it even sharper. There is a difference between being behind and being misaligned. Behind is a distance problem. Misaligned is a direction problem. Most of the panic you call falling behind is actually misalignment you can no longer numb. Okay, stay with me, because this next part recontextualizes everything I just said. There is a single mechanism tying these three together. When you improve, you increase the accuracy of your self-model. And accuracy feels like threat before it feels like freedom. Think about evolution for a second. A creature that suddenly sees more clearly does not feel peace. It feels danger because it can now detect more predators, more uncertainty, more gaps in its plan. Clarity increases perceived risk, so as you become more psychologically developed, you detect more of what could go wrong, more of what you have not done, more of what you could become. You are not falling behind. You are becoming more temporally aware. You are feeling time as a limited resource, not as an endless fog. And here is the uncomfortable detail. Time awareness is not evenly distributed across people. Some people genuinely do not feel it. They float. They move through life with low future simulation. yet they can be behind and not notice. If you are the kind of person who improves, you are also the kind of person whose brain simulates futures. That simulation creates pressure, so the question is not, how do I stop feeling behind? The question is, how do I interpret that pressure correctly so it stops turning into shame? Because shame is the toxic conversion. Pressure says, act. Shame says, you are late, you are defective, you do not belong. Same energy, different story. Now let me give you a concrete way to test what is happening in your case. The next time you feel behind, ask yourself 3 questions and answer them fast before your mind starts performing. First, behind relative to what clock? Not person. Clock. Whose timeline are you using? Family timeline. Internet timeline. Your own childhood fantasy timeline. Industry timeline. When you name the clock, you often realize it was installed in you, not chosen by you. Second, behind in what currency? Skills, money, social status, emotional stability, romantic milestones, physical health. These are not interchangeable. Most people feel behind because they are mixing currencies. You will be proud of your emotional growth and then judge yourself with financial metrics. That creates a permanent sense of loss because you are winning one game and grading yourself in another. Third, is the signal coming from distance or from resolution? Distance means you are far from a specific target you chose. Resolution means you are seeing details you used to miss. If it is resolution, your job is not to sprint. Your job is to stabilize and update the system around you so the new clarity does not feel like emergency. And that leads to the framework I think changes everything. You need 2 scoreboards, not 1. Most people use a single scoreboard called outcome. How far am I from the ideal life? That scoreboard will always make you feel behind because the ideal life is an asymptote. You can approach it forever and never arrive. The second scoreboard is calibration. Is my internal model becoming more accurate? Am I making better predictions? Am I choosing better problems? Am I updating my environment? Calibration is what improvement actually is. When you only track outcomes, your brain treats every new insight as evidence you are late. When you track calibration, your brain can interpret new insight as progress, and even if the external results lag. Let me show you what that looks like in real life. You start therapy and suddenly you feel worse. Outcome scoreboard says, I am broken. Calibration scoreboard says, I can now detect patterns I was numb to. That is an upgrade. You start studying seriously and your confidence drops. Outcome scoreboard says, I am not smart. Calibration scoreboard says, my model of the field just became more realistic. That is what learning feels like. You start building a business and you become anxious. Outcome scoreboard says, I am failing. Calibration scoreboard says, I can now see the actual variables that matter. That is what competence feels like, not comfort. Competence. Now, this is nuanced but important. Using the calibration scoreboard does not mean you ignore outcomes. It means you stop using outcomes as emotional proof of worth in the short term. Outcomes are slow. Calibration is fast. So if you only reward slow signals, you will live in chronic deprivation. Here is the final piece, and it is the one that makes the feeling of falling behind stop haunting you. Your brain is confusing acceleration with position. If you are accelerating, you can still be behind in absolute position, but you are no longer doomed. The feeling of behindness is sometimes just the nervous system noticing that you care and that you have momentum and that there is now something to lose. So the goal is not to feel ahead. Ahead is a moving concept. The goal is to build a life where your acceleration is under your control and your clocks are chosen, not inherited. And once you do that, the same sensation that used to feel like falling behind starts to feel like alignment pressure. It becomes guidance, not condemnation. So next time that thought shows up, I am still behind, do not automatically believe it. Translate it. Ask, what clock am I using? What currency am I grading in? And is this distance or resolution? Because if it is resolution, congratulations. You are not late. You are awake. If this changed how you interpret that feeling, I would genuinely like to hear what question hit you the hardest in the comments. And remember this line, because it closes the loop from the beginning. The pain is not proof you are failing. It is proof your measurement system just upgraded.